The whispers started on a Tuesday morning in March. I noticed them immediately when I walked into the break room at Meridian Financial Solutions in downtown Phoenix. Three colleagues who'd been chatting animatedly suddenly fell silent, their eyes darting away from mine as they pretended to be deeply interested in their coffee cups. The uncomfortable silence stretched for what felt like an eternity before they mumbled generic greetings and quickly dispersed. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Something was wrong. After 8 years of building my reputation as the top portfolio analyst in the Southwest Division, I could read the office dynamics better than most people could read a balance sheet. This wasn't the usual Monday morning sluggishness or quarterly stress. This was something else entirely. My name is Celeste Marina Blackwood, and at 31 years old, I had worked my way up from an entry-level financial assistant to managing a portfolio worth over $200 million. I had never missed a deadline, never lost a major client, and had consistently outperformed every benchmark set by corporate headquarters in New York. My analytical reports were cited in industry publications, and I had been featured twice in Financial Weekly as one of the rising stars in investment management. But that Tuesday morning, everything I had built began to crumble because of something I couldn't see coming. The first real sign that my professional world was about to implode came during our weekly team meeting that afternoon. Our department head, Marcus Webb, was leading the discussion about the upcoming quarterly review when he made what seemed like an offhand comment that made my blood run cold. We need to ensure all our client presentations are thorough and, well, mentally sound, he said, his eyes briefly flicking in my direction before looking away. Our clients trust us with their life savings, and they need to know we're all operating at full capacity. The phrase mentally sound hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Several colleagues shifted uncomfortably in their seats, and I noticed David Chen, my closest work friend, frowning deeply as he looked between Marcus and me. The meeting continued, but I barely heard another word. My mind was racing, trying to understand what Marcus was implying and why he was implying it about me. I had always prided myself on my mental sharpness and emotional stability. Sure, I was known for being meticulous, sometimes even perfectionist in my approach to analysis. I double-checked my work, questioned assumptions, and wasn't afraid to challenge conventional wisdom when the data supported a different conclusion. Some people called it obsessive, but I called it thorough. In the financial world, attention to detail wasn't just preferred, it was essential. After the meeting, I lingered in my office, a corner space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the sprawling Phoenix cityscape. The mountains in the distance were bathed in the golden light of late afternoon, but I couldn't appreciate the beauty. Something was happening to my reputation, and I needed to understand what it was before it destroyed everything I had worked for. David knocked on my doorframe around 5:30 after most of the office had cleared out. His expression was troubled, and he closed the door behind him before sitting down in the chair across from my desk. "Celeste, we need to talk," he said quietly. "There are things being said about you, and I don't think you're aware of them." My stomach dropped, but I kept my voice steady. "What kind of things?" David ran his hands through his dark hair, clearly uncomfortable. "Marcus has been having private conversations with people. He's suggesting that you've been showing signs of mental instability. He's pointing to your attention to detail as evidence of obsessive-compulsive tendencies, and he's questioning whether you're fit to handle major client accounts." The words hit me like a physical blow. I had expected office politics, maybe some professional jealousy, but this was something far more insidious and dangerous. Mental health stigma in the financial industry could end careers permanently. "What specific examples is he giving?" I asked, my analytical mind immediately shifting into evidence-gathering mode. "He's taking normal behaviors and twisting them, like how you organize your client files by both alphabetical order and risk assessment level. He's calling that compulsive behavior. He mentioned how you always arrive at the office by 7:15 and don't usually leave until after 6, claiming it shows an unhealthy relationship with work. He even brought up how you keep that small notebook where you jot down ideas and observations throughout the day, suggesting it might be some kind of manic documentation. I felt a surge of anger mixed with disbelief. Every behavior Marcus was citing was exactly what had made me successful. My organizational systems ensured nothing fell through the cracks. My long hours allowed me to thoroughly research every investment recommendation. My notebook contained insights that had saved clients millions of dollars over the years. David, has he said these things to you directly? I asked, my analytical mind immediately shifting into evidence-gathering mode. He's taking normal behaviors and twisting them, like how you organize your client files by both alphabetical order and risk assessment level. He's calling that compulsive behavior. He mentioned how you always arrive at the office by 7:15 and don't usually leave until after 6, claiming it shows an unhealthy relationship with work. He even brought up how you keep that small notebook where you jot down ideas and observations throughout the day, suggesting it might be some kind of manic documentation. I felt a surge of anger, mixed with disbelief, based on my what, Marcus was citing as evidence of mental instability. In the investment world, the difference between thorough analysis and obsessive behavior was often just a matter of perspective. Successful portfolio managers were expected to be detail-oriented, dedicated, and constantly thinking about market trends and client needs. I realized that Marcus's campaign against me wasn't random. 2 weeks earlier, I had submitted a comprehensive report challenging the firm's recommended investment strategy for our largest institutional client, the Phoenix Teachers Pension Fund. My analysis had shown that their current approach was unnecessarily risky and could potentially result in significant losses during the next market downturn. Marcus had initially dismissed my concerns, but when I presented my alternative strategy to the client directly during a routine quarterly review, they had been impressed enough to request a formal proposal. The commission on managing the pension fund's portfolio was worth nearly $3 million annually to Meridian Financial Solutions. If my alternative strategy was adopted, it would essentially prove that my analytical approach was superior to the one Marcus had been advocating.
For someone who had built his reputation on being the strategic visionary of the Southwest Division, that kind of professional embarrassment could be career-ending. So Marcus had decided to end my career first. Over the next few days, I began to notice the campaign against me escalating. Colleagues who had previously sought my advice on complex analyses suddenly stopped including me in their discussions. During client meetings, Marcus would make subtle comments about the importance of stable leadership and consistent decision-making. He began requesting additional documentation for my recommendations, claiming it was part of a new quality assurance initiative, but only applying these requirements to my work. The most damaging incident occurred during a presentation to prospective clients from a major technology company looking to establish a corporate investment account. I had prepared extensively, as always, creating detailed projections and risk assessments for various portfolio configurations. The presentation was going well, until Marcus interrupted me mid-sentence. I want to make sure our potential clients understand that we thoroughly vet all our recommendations, he said, his tone suggesting concern. Celeste, can you walk them through your risk calculation methodology one more time? I want to make sure it's completely clear. The request was unusual and unnecessary. I had already explained my methodology clearly, and the clients had seemed satisfied with my analysis. But Marcus's tone implied that there might be something questionable about my approach. I noticed the subtle exchange of glances between the potential clients, and the meeting concluded with them saying they would review all the materials before making a decision. We never heard from them again. That weekend, I made a decision that would ultimately save my career. Instead of confronting Marcus directly or filing a complaint with Human Resources, I chose a different path. I scheduled an appointment with Dr. Sarah Hendricks, a psychiatrist who specialized in workplace mental health assessments. If Marcus wanted to question my mental stability, I would get a professional evaluation that would definitively settle the matter. Dr. Hendricks' office was located in a modern medical complex in central Phoenix, decorated in calming earth tones with artwork featuring desert landscapes. She was a woman in her mid-50s with kind eyes and an immediately reassuring presence. During our initial conversation, I explained the situation I was facing at work and requested a comprehensive psychological evaluation. I want to be clear about why I'm here, I told her during that first session. I don't believe I have any mental health issues that would affect my professional performance, but I need documentation to protect my career. Someone is using mental health stigma as a weapon against me, and I want to fight back with facts. Dr. Hendricks nodded thoughtfully. That's a refreshingly direct approach. Many people in your situation tried to deny that there's even a problem. Tell me about these behaviors that are being characterized as concerning. I spent the next hour describing my work habits, organizational systems, and professional approach. Dr. Hendricks asked detailed questions about my sleep patterns, stress management, relationships with colleagues, and general life satisfaction. She was particularly interested in my motivation for my meticulous work style and how I felt when my routines were disrupted. Celeste, based on our conversation today, I'm not seeing any obvious signs of mental health issues that would impact your professional capabilities, she said as our session concluded. However, I'd like to conduct a full battery of psychological assessments to give you the comprehensive documentation you're seeking. This will include personality assessments, cognitive function tests, and evaluations for various conditions that might affect workplace performance. Over the next 2 weeks, I underwent extensive testing. The process was thorough and sometimes exhausting, but I appreciated Dr. Hendricks's methodical approach. She administered standardized tests for anxiety disorders, obsessive-compulsive disorder, bipolar disorder, attention deficit disorder, and several other conditions. She also conducted cognitive assessments to evaluate my decision-making processes, stress response, and interpersonal skills. Meanwhile at work, Marcus's campaign against me continued to intensify. He had begun scheduling weekly check-in meetings with me, ostensibly to ensure I was managing my workload effectively. During these meetings, he would ask leading questions about whether I was feeling overwhelmed, if I thought I might benefit from taking some time off, and whether I had considered seeking professional help for stress management. "I'm concerned that you're taking on too much responsibility," he said during one particularly uncomfortable meeting. "I've noticed you seem anxious during team meetings, and several colleagues have mentioned that you appear to be under significant pressure." The gaslighting was sophisticated and subtle. Marcus never directly stated that I had mental health problems, but he consistently planted seeds of doubt about my stability and well-being. He had created an environment where my professional competence was constantly being questioned, not because of my actual performance, but because of fabricated concerns about my mental state. The situation reached a critical point when Marcus scheduled a meeting with our regional director, Patricia Morales, who was visiting from the Los Angeles office. Patricia had been my champion for years, recognizing my analytical skills and consistently rating my performance as exceptional. But when she arrived for our scheduled quarterly review, Marcus had arranged for the meeting to include a discussion about team wellness and ensuring all staff are operating at peak capacity. "I've been monitoring the team's stress levels closely," Marcus told Patricia, with me sitting right there. "I want to make sure we're not pushing anyone beyond their comfortable limits. Sometimes high performers don't recognize when they need support." Patricia looked confused by the sudden focus on wellness, particularly since our division had consistently exceeded all performance targets. "Is there a specific concern I should be aware of?" she asked. Marcus glanced at me with what appeared to be sympathetic concern. "I think it would be beneficial for everyone if we implemented more regular wellness check-ins. Some team members might be struggling more than they're willing to admit." After the meeting, Patricia asked to speak with me privately. Her expression was troubled, and I realized that Marcus's subtle campaign was beginning to affect even my strongest supporters. "Celeste, is everything okay?" she asked directly.
Marcus seems to think you might be dealing with some personal challenges that are affecting your work. Your performance numbers are still excellent, but I want to make sure you have the support you need. This was the moment I had been preparing for. Instead of defending myself against vague implications or trying to explain away Marcus's manufactured concerns, I pulled out the preliminary assessment letter Dr. Hendricks had provided me. "Patricia, I want to show you something," I said, handing her the document. "I've been undergoing a comprehensive psychological evaluation because I became aware that questions were being raised about my mental fitness for this position. I wanted to address those concerns with professional documentation." Patricia read the letter, her eyebrows rising as she processed what she was seeing.
The preliminary assessment clearly stated that I showed no signs of mental health issues that would impact my professional performance. Dr. Hendricks had noted that my attention to detail and systematic approach to work were consistent with high-functioning individuals in demanding careers, not indicators of mental health problems. Celeste, who raised concerns about your mental fitness? Patricia asked, her tone shifting from sympathetic to serious. I think that's a conversation you should have with Marcus, I replied carefully, but I wanted you to have the facts before any decisions were made about my role or responsibilities. That evening, I received a text message from David asking if I could meet him for coffee the next morning before work. When we met at a small cafe near our office, his expression was grim. Marcus called an emergency meeting yesterday after Patricia left, he told me. He told the senior staff that you had been undergoing psychiatric evaluation and that he was concerned about the impact on team morale. He suggested that maybe you should take extended leave while you get the help you need. I felt a flash of anger at Marcus's manipulation, but also a sense of vindication. He was escalating his campaign just as I was gathering the evidence to defend myself. David, I need you to do something for me, I said. I need you to document exactly what Marcus said in that meeting. Write down everything you can remember about his exact words, who was present, and what the context was. This is going to become very important very soon. 2 weeks later, Dr. Hendricks completed her comprehensive evaluation. The final report was 23 pages of detailed analysis, test results, and professional conclusions. I read through it carefully, feeling a mixture of relief and anger as I absorbed the findings. The report conclusively stated that I showed no signs of mental health disorders that would affect my professional capabilities. Dr. Hendricks had specifically evaluated me for the conditions Marcus had been implying, including obsessive-compulsive disorder, anxiety disorders, and bipolar disorder. Her findings indicated that my behavioral patterns were consistent with high-achieving professionals in demanding fields. More importantly, Dr. Hendricks had included a section addressing workplace discrimination based on mental health perceptions. She noted that my case appeared to involve the weaponization of mental health stigma for professional retaliation, and she recommended that my employer review their practices to ensure compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act and other relevant employment laws. Armed with this documentation, I scheduled a meeting with Patricia, who had returned to Phoenix for the monthly regional review. I also requested that Jennifer from Human Resources be present, along with the regional legal counsel who happened to be visiting that week. The meeting was scheduled for a Thursday morning in the large conference room overlooking the downtown Phoenix skyline. I arrived early and arranged copies of Dr. Hendricks's report for each attendee, along with a timeline I had prepared documenting Marcus's campaign against me. When everyone was seated, I addressed the group with the same analytical precision I brought to my investment recommendations. 3 weeks ago, I became aware that questions were being raised about my mental fitness to perform my duties, I began. Rather than responding defensively, I chose to address these concerns through professional evaluation. I'd like to share those results with you. I walked through the key findings of Dr. Hendricks's report, emphasizing the comprehensive nature of the evaluation and the definitive conclusion that I had no mental health issues affecting my work performance. I then presented my timeline, documenting the specific instances where Marcus had made implications about my mental state, including the exact quotes David and other colleagues had provided. The legal counsel, a sharp-eyed woman named Rebecca Torres, took extensive notes throughout my presentation. When I finished, she asked several pointed questions about the timeline and the specific language Marcus had used. "Celeste, do you have any witnesses to these conversations?" she asked. "Yes, several colleagues have agreed to provide statements about what they heard Marcus say. I also have the original meeting notes from several instances where these implications were made in front of multiple people." Patricia's expression had grown increasingly serious as I presented my case. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and looked at Rebecca. "What are the legal implications here?" Patricia asked. Rebecca's response was immediate and direct. "If these allegations are accurate, we're looking at potential ADA violations, workplace harassment, and possibly defamation. Creating a hostile work environment based on perceived mental health status is a serious legal liability." Jennifer from Human Resources had been quietly reviewing the psychiatric report. "This evaluation is incredibly thorough," she said. "Dr. Hendricks is a respected professional, and her conclusions are unambiguous. There's no basis for questioning Celeste's fitness for duty." Patricia stood up and began pacing the conference room, clearly processing the implications of what she had learned. "Celeste, I need to ask you directly, what outcome are you seeking from this situation?"
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
I had anticipated this question and had prepared my response carefully. I want a formal acknowledgement that the concerns raised about my mental fitness were unfounded. I want an end to the harassment and implications about my stability, and I want assurance that my career progression won't be impacted by these false allegations. "And what about Marcus?" Patricia asked. "That's a management decision," I replied, "but I think the pattern of behavior speaks for itself." The meeting concluded with Patricia and Rebecca agreeing to conduct a formal investigation into Marcus's conduct. They interviewed several colleagues over the next week, including David, who provided a detailed account of the conversations he had witnessed. Other team members came forward with similar stories of Marcus making subtle implications about my mental state and suggesting that I might need professional help. The investigation also revealed something I hadn't known. Marcus had been in contact with the pension fund client, subtly suggesting that they might want to reconsider working with me on their portfolio restructuring. He had implied that I was under significant stress and that they might be better served by working with a different analyst. When confronted with this evidence, Marcus initially denied any wrongdoing, claiming he had been genuinely concerned about my well-being. However, when presented with specific quotes and the testimony of multiple witnesses, his story began to fall apart. The resolution came faster than I had expected. Marcus was terminated for violating company policies regarding workplace harassment and discrimination. Patricia issued a formal statement to the team acknowledging that unfounded concerns had been raised about my professional capabilities and that these concerns had been thoroughly investigated and found to be without merit. More importantly for my career, the pension fund client decided to move forward with my alternative investment strategy after learning about the situation. They were impressed not only with my analytical skills, but also with my professional response to workplace adversity. The implementation of my strategy became a case study that was eventually featured in several industry publications. 6 months later, I was promoted to Senior Portfolio Director, with responsibility for all institutional clients in the Southwest region. My first major initiative was implementing new workplace wellness policies that included proper mental health awareness training and strict protocols for addressing mental health-related concerns in the workplace. Dr. Hendricks and I stayed in touch, and she later told me that my case had inspired her to write a paper on the weaponization of mental health stigma in workplace settings. The paper was published in the Journal of Occupational Psychology and has been cited in several employment law cases. Looking back on that experience, I realized that Marcus's attempt to destroy my career based on fabricated mental health concerns actually strengthened my position in the industry. The comprehensive psychiatric evaluation became a powerful tool, not just for defending myself, but for educating others about the harmful effects of mental health discrimination in the workplace. The whispers that started that Tuesday morning in March had been intended to end my career. Instead, they became the catalyst for the most successful period of my professional life. Sometimes the greatest victories come not from avoiding challenges, but from meeting them head-on with preparation, documentation, and unwavering commitment to the truth. My mother always told me that the best defense against lies is an abundance of truth. Dr. Hendricks's report provided that truth, and it cleared my name in a way that no amount of arguing or defending could have accomplished. In the end, professional vindication isn't about proving your critics wrong. It's about proving yourself right. The real test of my vindication came 3 months after my promotion when Meridian Financial Solutions was approached by Sterling Dynamics, one of the largest private equity firms on the West Coast. They were looking for a partner to manage the investment portfolios for their subsidiary companies, representing nearly $800 million in managed assets.
It was the kind of opportunity that could transform our regional office from a mid-tier operation into a major player in the Southwest financial market. What made the situation particularly interesting was that Sterling Dynamics had specifically requested to work with me. Their due diligence team had researched my background extensively, including the incident with Marcus and my subsequent vindication. Rather than seeing my experience as a liability, they viewed it as evidence of my integrity and professional resilience. The initial meeting was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in our largest conference room. Patricia had flown in from Los Angeles specifically for this presentation, and our entire senior team was involved in the preparation. As I reviewed my presentation materials the night before, I reflected on how different this felt from the anxiety-inducing meetings during Marcus's campaign against me. Now, instead of defending my mental fitness, I was preparing to showcase the analytical approach that had made me successful. Sterling Dynamics arrived with a team of 4 executives, led by their chief investment officer, Mikkel Rockman, a man in his early 40s, known throughout the industry for his meticulous approach to partner selection. With him were Elena Vasquez, their head of risk assessment, James Park, their legal counsel, and Dr. Amanda Foster, their director of corporate psychology. The presence of Dr. Foster immediately caught my attention. It was unusual for a private equity firm to include a psychology professional in their partner evaluation process, but I quickly realized that my experience with workplace mental health discrimination had likely influenced their decision to bring her along. Ms. Blackwood, Mikkel began after the introductions were complete, we've reviewed your portfolio performance extensively and we're impressed with your analytical methodology. However, we're equally interested in your approach to handling professional challenges. We understand you recently dealt with some workplace difficulties that ultimately led to significant policy changes at Meridian. I had anticipated this topic would arise, and I had prepared a response that was both professional and informative. The experience taught me the importance of addressing workplace issues with documentation and professional support rather than emotional reactions. It also reinforced my belief that the best business decisions are based on comprehensive analysis and factual evidence. Dr. Hendricks leaned forward slightly. We've reviewed the psychiatric evaluation that was conducted during that period. Dr. Hendricks's report was remarkably thorough. What struck us most was your proactive approach to obtaining professional validation rather than simply defending yourself against unfounded allegations. I've learned that in both investment analysis and in professional conflicts, the strongest position is built on solid evidence. When someone questioned my mental fitness for this role, I chose to address that question definitively rather than allowing doubt to persist. Elena Vasquez, who had been studying my portfolio projections, looked up from her documents. Your risk assessment methodology is particularly impressive. Can you walk us through how you developed this approach? I spent the next 40 minutes presenting the analytical framework I had refined over my years at Meridian.
The system incorporated traditional financial metrics with behavioral economics principles and psychological market indicators. It was the same methodology that Marcus had tried to characterize as obsessive behavior, but Sterling Dynamics recognized it as sophisticated analytical thinking. This level of detail and systematic approach is exactly what we're looking for, Michael said as I concluded my presentation. Too many portfolio managers rely on intuition or simplified models. Your method demonstrates the kind of thorough analysis our subsidiary companies need. James Park, who had been taking extensive notes throughout the presentation, looked up from his legal pad. We're also interested in the workplace policy changes you implemented after your promotion. Can you tell us about those initiatives? This was an area I was particularly proud to discuss. After my experience with Marcus, I had worked with human resources and legal counsel to develop comprehensive workplace mental health policies that went far beyond standard compliance requirements. We implemented a 3-tier approach, I explained. First, mandatory training for all managers on appropriate workplace conduct regarding mental health topics. Second, clear protocols for addressing legitimate performance concerns without resorting to implications about mental fitness. Third, partnerships with qualified mental health professionals to provide confidential support for employees who genuinely need assistance. Dr. Foster nodded approvingly. Those policies align with best practices we've seen in other organizations. Have you seen positive results from implementation? Employee satisfaction scores in our division have increased by 37%, and we've had zero mental health-related workplace complaints since the policies were implemented, I replied. More importantly, we've created an environment where people feel safe to seek help when they need it, rather than hiding struggles that might affect their performance. The meeting continued for another hour, with Sterling Dynamics asking detailed questions about my investment philosophy, client relationship management, and long-term strategic vision. As the session concluded, Michael stood and shook my hand firmly. Celeste, we'll be in touch within the week with our decision. I want you to know that this presentation has exceeded our expectations in every area. After Sterling Dynamics left, Patricia and I debriefed in her temporary office. Her excitement was evident, but she also seemed thoughtful about the broader implications of what had just occurred. "That was exceptional work," she said, "but I'm particularly struck by how they approached the topic of your experience with Marcus. They didn't see it as a liability at all. I think the business world is becoming more sophisticated about mental health issues. Companies are starting to recognize that discrimination based on perceived mental health problems is not only legally problematic, but also bad for business." Patricia nodded. "Your experience may have been difficult, but the way you handled it has actually enhanced your professional reputation. That's remarkable." 3 days later, Michael Raymond called with Sterling Dynamics' decision. They wanted to move forward with a partnership agreement that would make Meridian Financial their exclusive portfolio management partner for the Southwest region. The contract was worth approximately $15 million in annual fees, making it the largest client relationship in our office's history. What made the news even better was that Sterling Dynamics had specifically requested that I serve as the primary relationship manager for their account. They wanted the analytical approach and professional integrity they had observed during our presentation to be the foundation of their partnership with Meridian. The success of the Sterling Dynamics partnership had ripple effects throughout the financial industry. Word spread quickly that one of the most selective private equity firms on the West Coast had chosen to work with our relatively small regional office, specifically because of my involvement. Within 6 months, we received inquiries from 12 other major firms interested in similar partnerships. My professional reputation, which Marcus had tried to destroy through manufactured mental health concerns, had actually been strengthened by the way I had responded to his attacks. The comprehensive psychiatric evaluation that had seemed like a defensive necessity at the time had become a powerful symbol of my commitment to professional excellence and evidence-based decision-making. But the most meaningful recognition came from an unexpected source. Dr. Sarah Hendricks called me 6 months after Sterling Dynamics had signed with Meridian to tell me about a new development in her research. "Celeste, I wanted you to know that your case has inspired a significant shift in how we approach workplace mental health evaluations," she said during our phone conversation. "The paper I published about your experience has been cited in over 40 academic articles, and I've been invited to speak at conferences across the country about the weaponization of mental health stigma in professional settings." She went on to explain that my case had become a textbook example of how to respond to workplace mental health discrimination. Several other professionals who had faced similar situations had sought her out for evaluations, and she had developed a specialized practice area focused on defending against false mental health allegations in the workplace. "Your decision to get a proactive evaluation rather than simply denying the allegations has become a recommended strategy," Dr. Hendricks continued. "We're seeing more people take this approach, and it's been remarkably effective in protecting careers and creating accountability for discriminatory behavior." The conversation with Dr. Hendricks made me realize that my experience with Marcus had implications far beyond my own career. The documentation and professional response I had chosen had created a precedent that was helping other people facing similar situations. This realization led to my next major professional decision. I began speaking at industry conferences about workplace mental health discrimination, sharing my experience and the strategies I had used to address it. My first speaking engagement was at the Southwest Financial Professionals Conference in Albuquerque, where I presented a session titled Evidence-Based Responses to Workplace Mental Health Allegations. The overall response was overwhelming. The conference organizers had expected perhaps 50 attendees for my session, but over 200 people showed up, including standing room only in the back of the conference hall.
During the question and answer period, multiple attendees shared their own experiences with similar discrimination, and several approached me afterward to ask for advice on handling ongoing situations. One particularly memorable conversation was with Jennifer Walsh, a senior loan officer from a major bank in Denver. She had been facing implications about her mental fitness after she had filed a complaint about gender discrimination in her workplace. Her supervisor had begun suggesting that her complaint might be the result of stress-related mental health issues rather than legitimate workplace concerns. "I never thought about getting a professional evaluation," Jennifer told me after my presentation. "I was so focused on proving that the discrimination was real that I didn't consider addressing the mental health implications directly." I gave Jennifer Dr. Hendricks's contact information and suggested she consider the same proactive approach I had taken.
6 months later, Jennifer sent me an email with an update on her situation. She had obtained a comprehensive psychological evaluation that confirmed she had no mental health issues affecting her professional judgment. Armed with this documentation, she had successfully challenged both the original gender discrimination and the subsequent mental health implications. Her bank had ultimately settled her complaint and implemented new training programs for management. The speaking engagements led to another unexpected opportunity. The American Association of Financial Professionals invited me to join their Ethics and Professional Standards Committee, specifically to help develop guidelines for addressing mental health-related workplace issues. The committee was tasked with creating industry standards that would protect both employees and employers while ensuring that legitimate mental health concerns could be addressed appropriately. Working on the committee was one of the most professionally satisfying experiences of my career. We developed comprehensive guidelines that balanced the need to support employees with mental health challenges while preventing the weaponization of mental health stigma for discriminatory purposes. The guidelines included specific protocols for managers who had legitimate concerns about employee performance, clear procedures for obtaining professional evaluations when necessary, and strict accountability measures for supervisors who misused mental health implications. The guidelines were published as an industry white paper and were eventually adopted by over 300 financial services firms across the country. Meridian Financial was among the first companies to implement the full protocol, and our policies became a model for other organizations in the industry. Meanwhile, my career continued to flourish in ways I had never anticipated. The Sterling Dynamics partnership had been so successful that they approached Meridian about expanding our relationship to include their East Coast subsidiary companies. This led to my promotion to Vice President of Institutional Client Services, with responsibility for managing relationships with major corporate clients across multiple regions. The promotion came with an offer to relocate to Meridian's headquarters in New York, but I chose to remain in Phoenix and establish a new Southwest regional headquarters. This decision allowed me to build a team of analysts and relationship managers who shared my commitment to thorough analysis and ethical business practices. One of my first hires for the new regional headquarters was David Chen, my former colleague who had provided crucial support during the situation with Marcus. David had continued to excel at Meridian after Marcus's departure, but he was excited about the opportunity to work directly with me on building something new. "You know, Celeste," David said during his first week in the new position, "what happened with Marcus was terrible, but looking at where we are now, it's almost like it was meant to happen. You never would have had the opportunity to develop these policies and become a national speaker if he hadn't forced you to address those issues." David's observation was perceptive. While I would never be grateful for the stress and uncertainty Marcus had caused, I had to acknowledge that my response to his discrimination had ultimately enhanced my career in ways I could never have anticipated. The experience had forced me to develop skills in crisis management, professional advocacy, and policy development that had become central to my success. The most gratifying aspect of my expanded role was the opportunity to mentor other professionals who are facing workplace challenges. Through my speaking engagements and committee work, I had developed a network of colleagues who regularly sought advice on navigating difficult professional situations. One case that particularly resonated with me involved Thomas Martinez, a portfolio manager from a mid-sized firm in San Diego. Thomas had been diagnosed with mild anxiety disorder and had been receiving treatment that was successfully managing his condition.
However, when his diagnosis became known to his supervisor, he began facing questions about his ability to handle high-stress client situations. Thomas contacted me after attending one of my conference presentations, and we had several conversations about his options. Following the approach I had pioneered, Thomas obtained a comprehensive evaluation from a workplace psychology specialist who confirmed that his anxiety disorder was well managed and had no impact on his professional capabilities. More importantly, Thomas used the evaluation as the foundation for an educational conversation with his management team about anxiety disorders and workplace accommodations. Rather than hiding his condition or accepting discriminatory treatment, he became an advocate for mental health awareness in his organization. The outcome was remarkable. Thomas's firm not only retained him in his position, but asked him to help develop their own mental health accommodation policies. He eventually became their Director of Employee Wellness, a newly created position that focused on supporting staff's mental health while maintaining high performance standards. These success stories reinforced my belief that the proactive approach I had taken with Marcus was more than just a defensive strategy. It was actually a powerful tool for creating positive change in workplace culture and breaking down harmful stigmas about mental health in professional settings. As my reputation in this area grew, I began receiving invitations to consult with organizations that were facing mental health-related workplace challenges. These consulting engagements allowed me to work directly with companies to develop policies and training programs that prevented discrimination while supporting employees who genuinely needed mental health accommodations. One of my most significant consulting projects was with Phoenix Metropolitan Hospital, a large healthcare organization that was struggling with mental health discrimination among their administrative staff. Several employees had filed complaints alleging that supervisors were using mental health stigma to retaliate against workers who raised concerns about patient care or workplace safety. The hospital's leadership was genuinely committed to addressing the problem, but they lacked the expertise to develop effective solutions. They hired me to conduct a comprehensive review of their policies and practices and to recommend changes that would protect both employees and the organization. The project took 4 months to complete and involved interviews with over 60 staff members, reviews of hundreds of personnel files, and analysis of the hospital's existing policies and training programs. What I discovered was a pattern of well-intentioned but poorly implemented mental health policies that actually enabled discrimination rather than preventing it. The hospital's managers had received basic training about mental health awareness, but they had not been given clear guidelines about how to address legitimate performance concerns without resorting to mental health implications. As a result, some supervisors were using vague references to stress and emotional stability as a way of avoiding dealing with substantive workplace issues. My recommendations included a complete overhaul of their management training program, implementation of clear protocols for addressing performance concerns, and establishment of partnerships with qualified mental health professionals who could provide objective evaluations when necessary. Most importantly, I recommended the creation of strict accountability measures for managers who misused mental health-related language in personnel decisions. The hospital implemented all of my recommendations, and the results were dramatic. Mental health-related complaints dropped by 85% within 6 months, while employee satisfaction scores increased significantly. The hospital's approach became a model for other healthcare organizations dealing with similar challenges. This consulting work led to my next major career milestone. The National Institute for Workplace Mental Health, a nonprofit organization focused on research and policy development, invited me to join their board of directors. The institute was working to develop national standards for addressing mental health issues in professional settings, and they wanted someone with practical experience in implementing successful programs. Joining the Institute's board of directors connected me with researchers, policy experts, and business leaders from across the country who were working on similar issues. The collaborative environment was intellectually stimulating and professionally rewarding, and it gave me the opportunity to influence mental health policy at a national level. One of the Institute's most important projects was developing a certification program for organizations that demonstrated excellence in mental health accommodation and anti-discrimination practices. The certification process included comprehensive reviews of company policies, training programs, and actual implementation practices. I served as the chair of the certification committee, working with a team of psychologists, employment lawyers, and business leaders to develop rigorous standards that would be meaningful to both employees and employers. The certification program launched 2 years after I joined the board, and within its first year, over 150 organizations had applied for certification. Meridian Financial was among the first companies to receive the Institute's certification, recognizing the policies and practices we had developed following my experience with Marcus. The certification process validated that our approach had created genuine cultural change, not just compliance with legal requirements. Looking back on the journey from that first whispered conversation in the break room to my current role as a national advocate for workplace mental health rights, I am struck by how a single act of professional malice had ultimately led to positive change that affected thousands of people. Marcus's attempt to destroy my career through manufactured mental health concerns had backfired in ways he could never have anticipated. Instead of ending my professional advancement, his discrimination had forced me to develop skills in an area that became central to my success. The comprehensive psychiatric evaluation that was meant to be a defensive necessity had become a powerful tool for advocacy and education. More importantly, my experience had demonstrated that workplace mental health discrimination could be effectively challenged through documentation, professional support, and strategic advocacy. The approach I had pioneered was now being used by professionals across multiple industries to protect their careers and create accountability for discriminatory behavior. The path from where I had started had been unexpectedly crooked, but my future was now clearer than ever.
The ripple effects continued to expand. Dr. Hendricks had established a specialized practice that had helped dozens of professionals facing similar situations. The policies I had developed at Meridian had been adopted by hundreds of other organizations. The conference presentations I had given had influenced thousands of business leaders to reconsider their approaches to workplace mental health issues. Sometimes the greatest victories emerge from the most challenging defeats. Marcus had intended to end my career, but his actions had actually launched me into a level of professional success and personal fulfillment I had never imagined possible. The whispers that started in the break room had ultimately become a voice for positive change that was being heard across the entire business community. 5 years after that initial break room incident, I received an unexpected phone call that would bring my story full circle. The caller was Marcus Webb himself, reaching out through a mutual professional contact who had facilitated the conversation. His voice sounded different than I remembered, humbler and more uncertain. "Celeste, I know this call might seem strange, but I wanted to speak with you personally," he began. "I've been following your career from a distance, and I need to acknowledge something that's been weighing on me for years." I listened carefully as Marcus explained that he had spent considerable time in therapy after losing his position at Meridian, working through the personal insecurities and professional jealousies that had driven his behavior towards me. His therapist had encouraged him to reach out to people he had wronged as part of his healing process. "What I did to you was inexcusable," he continued. "I used mental health stigma as a weapon because I felt threatened by your confidence and success. I destroyed my own career in the process, but more importantly, I caused you significant pain and stress that you didn't deserve." The conversation was surreal in many ways. The man who had once tried to end my career by spreading rumors about my mental stability was now seeking redemption through acknowledging the very behaviors he had once denied. There was something both satisfying and sad about hearing him take full responsibility for his actions. "Marcus, I appreciate you calling," I replied honestly. "What you did was harmful, but my response to it ultimately led to positive changes that have helped many people. In an odd way, your actions created an opportunity for me to make a bigger impact than I might have otherwise." Marcus went on to explain that he had left the financial industry entirely and was now working as a compliance officer for a nonprofit organization focused on workplace ethics. His experience with the consequences of discriminatory behavior had given him a unique perspective on the importance of ethical business practices. "I've actually been using your case as an example in the training programs I develop," he said. "Obviously, I presented as an example of what not to do, but your response has become a model for how organizations should handle these situations properly." The irony was not lost on me that Marcus had become an inadvertent advocate for the very principles his behavior had violated.
Our conversation concluded with him expressing genuine gratitude for my willingness to speak with him, an acknowledgement that his actions had ultimately contributed to positive change, even if that had never been his intention. After hanging up, I reflected on how much my life had changed since that March morning when whispers had followed me through the office. The girl who had once felt isolated and under attack had become a nationally recognized expert on workplace mental health advocacy. The comprehensive psychiatric report that had initially felt like a defensive necessity had evolved into a blueprint for organizational change. 6 months after Marcus's call, I made a decision that would represent the culmination of everything I had learned from my experience. I announced my intention to establish the Workplace Mental Health Justice Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting professionals facing mental health discrimination and developing resources for organizations committed to creating inclusive workplace cultures. The foundation would provide several key services. First, we would offer grants to help professionals obtain comprehensive psychological evaluations when facing workplace mental health discrimination. Second, we would provide legal support and advocacy for workers dealing with retaliatory behavior related to mental health stigma. Third, we would develop and distribute educational resources to help organizations implement effective mental health accommodation policies. Most importantly, the foundation would maintain a database of qualified mental health professionals who specialized in workplace evaluations, making it easier for people to find the kind of expert support that Dr. Hendricks had provided me. We would also create a network of employment attorneys who understood the legal complexities of mental health discrimination cases. The response to the foundation's launch exceeded my expectations. Within 3 months, we had received over 200 inquiries from professionals facing various forms of mental health-related workplace discrimination. The cases ranged from subtle implications about emotional stability to overt demands for psychiatric evaluations as conditions of continued employment. One case that particularly stood out involved Maria Santos, a software engineer who had been passed over for promotion multiple times after her supervisor learned she was receiving treatment for depression. Despite her excellent performance reviews and technical skills, she was repeatedly told that leadership roles required emotional resilience that might be incompatible with her mental health treatment. The foundation provided Maria with funding for a comprehensive evaluation that demonstrated her depression was well managed and had no impact on her professional capabilities. Armed with this documentation, along with legal support from our network, Maria was able to challenge her employer's discriminatory practices. The company ultimately promoted her to the position she had been seeking and agreed to implement anti-discrimination training for all management staff. Another memorable case involved Robert Kim, a teacher who faced termination after experiencing a panic attack during a particularly stressful faculty meeting. The school administration had characterized his anxiety response as evidence that he was unfit to work with students, despite his 5 years of excellent teaching evaluations and strong student performance outcomes. The foundation's intervention in Robert's case involved not only providing evaluation support, but also educating the school district about anxiety disorders and appropriate workplace accommodations. The outcome was particularly gratifying because Robert not only kept his position, but became the district's advocate for teacher mental health support, helping to develop policies that protected other educators facing similar challenges. These individual victories were meaningful, but what gave me the greatest satisfaction was seeing the broader cultural shifts that were occurring across multiple industries. The awareness campaigns and policy development work that had grown out of my experience were contributing to genuine changes in how organizations approached mental health issues. 3 years after establishing the foundation, I was invited to testify before a congressional subcommittee that was considering federal legislation to strengthen workplace mental health protections. The opportunity to share my experience and recommendations at the national policy level represented the ultimate vindication of the approach I had taken in responding to Marcus's discrimination. During my testimony, I emphasized that effective mental health accommodation policies benefit both employees and employers by creating more productive, inclusive workplace cultures. I shared data from the organizations that had implemented comprehensive programs showing improved employee satisfaction, reduced turnover, and decreased legal liability. The subcommittee was particularly interested in the proactive evaluation approach that had been central to my own experience. Several committee members asked detailed questions about how this strategy could be scaled to help other workers facing similar situations. The key insight from my case, I told the subcommittee, is that professional documentation can transform a defensive situation into an opportunity for education and advocacy. When we respond to discrimination with facts rather than emotions, we create accountability for harmful behavior while building support for positive change. The federal legislation that ultimately emerged from those hearings included several provisions inspired by my testimony and the Foundation's work. The law strengthened protections against mental health-based workplace discrimination and required federal agencies to develop comprehensive accommodation policies that could serve as models for private sector organizations. As I sat in the congressional hearing room that day, I thought about the journey that had brought me to that moment. The path from a whispered conversation in a Phoenix break room to testifying before Congress had neither been linear nor predictable, but every step had built upon the lessons learned from that initial crisis. The comprehensive psychiatric report that Dr. Hendricks had conducted years earlier was now being used as a template by mental health professionals across the country.
The workplace policies I had developed at Meridian had been adopted by thousands of organizations. The advocacy strategies that had emerged from my experience were helping professionals in every industry protect their careers and dignity. Most importantly, the Foundation had created a sustainable infrastructure for supporting others facing similar challenges. We had helped over 800 professionals obtain proper evaluations and advocacy support, and our educational resources had been downloaded by more than 50,000 business leaders seeking to improve their organization's mental health policies. Looking back on that March morning when my world had seemed to be collapsing, I realized that Marcus's attempt to destroy my career through manufactured mental health concerns had actually launched me into the most meaningful work of my life. The discrimination that was intended to silence me had ultimately led to stronger protections and support systems for everyone facing similar discrimination. In the end, the best response to professional betrayal wasn't revenge or retaliation, but building something better that would prevent others from experiencing the same harm. The river had indeed moved around the stones, just as my mother had taught me, carrying away the obstacles while leaving the Foundation stronger than before. The Foundation's most challenging case arrived on a humid Thursday morning in July, almost 7 years after my own experience with workplace mental health discrimination. The caller was Dr. Lisa Chen, a prominent neurosurgeon from Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore, and her voice carried the same mixture of professional composure and underlying distress that I remembered from my own darkest days at Meridian Financial. "Ms. Blackwood, I've read about your work with the Foundation, and I need help," she began without preamble. "My department chief has been systematically undermining my position by suggesting I'm suffering from burnout and depression. He's using my dedication to patient care as evidence that I'm mentally unstable." Dr. Chen's case immediately struck me as particularly insidious because it involved the medical profession, where mental health stigma could literally be a matter of life and death. A surgeon facing questions about mental stability couldn't simply transfer to another department or find a new job easily. Medical licenses, hospital privileges, and patient safety considerations made the stakes exponentially higher than in most other professions. "Tell me exactly what's been happening," I said, settling into my office chair and pulling out a fresh legal pad. Over the years, I had learned that the details mattered enormously in these cases, and that patterns of discrimination often became clear only when viewed comprehensively. Dr. Chen explained that the problems had started 6 months earlier when she had challenged a decision by Dr. Harrison Wells, her department chief, to schedule elective surgeries during a period when the hospital was short-staffed. She had argued that patient safety required postponing non-emergency procedures until adequate nursing support was available. Harrison didn't appreciate being questioned, especially in front of other senior staff, Dr. Chen continued. Within a week, he started making comments about surgeons who couldn't handle pressure and suggesting that some people weren't cut out for the demands of neurosurgery. The escalation had been gradual but relentless.
Dr. Wells had begun scheduling Dr. Chen for the most difficult cases while simultaneously expressing concern about her ability to handle stress. He questioned her judgment on routine decisions that she had been making successfully for 8 years. Most damaging, he had started suggesting to other staff members that Dr. Chen might be experiencing depression or anxiety that was affecting her surgical performance. The terrible irony is that my surgical outcomes are among the best in the department, Dr. Chen said, her voice tight with frustration. My patient satisfaction scores are excellent, and I've never had a malpractice claim. But Harrison has created an atmosphere where people are watching me for signs of instability that don't exist. I recognize the sophisticated nature of Dr. Wells's campaign. Like Marcus Webb years earlier, he was using legitimate professional concerns as a cover for discriminatory behavior. By framing his attacks as worry about patient safety and surgeon wellness, he had made it difficult for Dr. Chen to challenge his actions without appearing defensive or unstable. Have you documented these incidents? I asked, already knowing the importance of creating a comprehensive record. I've been keeping notes, but I wasn't sure what would be legally relevant, Dr. Chen replied. I also recorded one conversation where Harrison suggested I might want to consider taking medical leave to address my stress levels. I was wearing a recording device because I suspected he might say something inappropriate. The recording was potentially crucial evidence, but I knew that medical professionals faced unique challenges in pursuing workplace discrimination claims. Hospital politics were notoriously complex, and challenging a department chief could have career-ending consequences even when the challenger was completely in the right. Dr. Chen, I want to help you, but I need you to understand that this process may take considerable energy and emotional energy, I warned. Medical settings present particular challenges because patient safety concerns can be used to justify almost any personnel decision, even discriminatory ones. I understand the risks, she replied firmly, but if I don't fight this, Harrison will continue targeting other physicians who question his decisions. There's already another surgeon in our department who's being subjected to similar treatment. That detail convinced me that Dr. Chen's case represented more than individual discrimination. It sounded like Dr. Wells had developed a systematic approach to silencing dissent by weaponizing mental health stigma against anyone who challenged his authority. I agreed to take on Dr. Chen's case, and we began with the same strategy that had proved effective in my own situation, obtaining a comprehensive psychiatric evaluation from a qualified professional who specialized in high-pressure careers. However, finding the right evaluator for a neurosurgeon required particular expertise. Through my network of mental health professionals, I connected Dr. Bennett Edmondson, a renowned psychiatrist who specialized in working with medical professionals facing burnout and stress.
Chen with Dr. Robert Martinez, a psychiatrist who had extensive experience working with medical professionals and understood the unique stressors faced by surgeons. Dr. Martinez had evaluated dozens of physicians facing various career challenges and had developed specialized assessment tools for measuring mental health in high-stakes medical environments. The evaluation will be thorough, I explained to Dr. Chen during our second phone conversation. Dr. Martinez will assess not only your general mental health, but also your specific fitness for surgical practice. This will include cognitive assessments, stress response evaluations, and analysis of your decision-making processes under pressure. While Dr. Chen underwent her evaluation, I worked with our legal team to investigate the broader pattern of Dr. Wells's behavior. We discovered that he had been appointed department chief just 18 months earlier, following a controversial reorganization that had forced out his predecessor. Since his appointment, 3 experienced surgeons had left the department, and 2 others had requested transfers to different hospitals. More significantly, we found that Dr. Wells had a history of using mental health implications to address conflicts with subordinates. In his previous position at a hospital in Chicago, he had faced an internal investigation for suggesting that a female resident was emotionally unstable after she had filed a sexual harassment complaint against another physician. The investigation in Chicago had been quietly settled, with Dr. Wells agreeing to undergo management training in exchange for a positive reference that had helped him secure his current position. The pattern was becoming clear.
Dr. Wells had learned to weaponize mental health concerns as a sophisticated form of retaliation that was difficult to challenge directly. Dr. Martinez completed Dr. Chen's evaluation after 2 weeks of comprehensive testing. His report was even more detailed than the assessment Dr. Hendricks had conducted for me years earlier, reflecting advances in workplace mental health evaluation techniques that had emerged partly from the advocacy work our foundation had supported. The findings were unequivocal. Dr. Chen showed no signs of depression, anxiety, or any other mental health condition that would affect her surgical capabilities. More importantly, Dr. Martinez's assessment included specific evaluations of her performance under stress, her decision-making processes in crisis situations, and her interpersonal skills in medical team environments. Dr. Chen demonstrates exceptional mental resilience and cognitive function, the report concluded. Her responses to stress are within normal ranges for high-performing surgeons, and her dedication to patient care reflects professional commitment rather than compulsive behavior. There is no psychological basis for questioning her fitness for surgical practice. Armed with this documentation, our legal team filed a formal complaint with Johns Hopkins Hospital Administration, alleging that Dr. Wells was engaging in discriminatory behavior based on fabricated mental health concerns. We included not only Dr. Chen's case, but also information about the pattern of similar behavior that had driven other physicians from the department. The hospital's response was swift and comprehensive. Within 48 hours of receiving our complaint, they launched an internal investigation led by their chief medical officer and supported by external legal counsel who specialized in healthcare employment issues. The investigation revealed the extent of Dr. Wells's problematic behavior. Multiple physicians came forward with similar experiences of having their mental fitness questioned after disagreeing with his decisions. The pattern was particularly troubling because it had created an environment where patient safety concerns were being ignored out of fear of retaliation. One of the most damaging revelations was that Dr. Wells had been pressuring the hospital's employee assistance program coordinator to provide him with confidential information about physicians who were seeking mental health support. This represented a serious violation of medical privacy laws and professional ethics standards. The hospital's investigation also uncovered evidence that Dr. Wells had been manipulating surgical schedules and case assignments to create additional stress for physicians he wanted to discredit. He had been assigning complex cases to surgeons during periods when they lacked adequate support staff, then using any complications or delays as evidence of performance problems. 3 weeks after the investigation began, Johns Hopkins Hospital announced that Dr. Wells had been removed from his position as department chief and placed on administrative leave pending further review. The hospital issued a formal statement acknowledging that discriminatory practices had occurred and committing to comprehensive policy changes to prevent similar incidents. More importantly for Dr. Chen, the hospital offered her a promotion to associate department chief, recognizing both her clinical excellence and her courage in challenging discriminatory behavior. The position came with expanded authority to implement patient safety protocols and oversight of the department's workplace culture initiatives. Dr. Chen's case became a landmark example of how mental health discrimination could be effectively challenged even in high-stakes medical environments. The comprehensive psychiatric evaluation had provided unassailable evidence of her fitness for practice, while the investigation had revealed the systematic nature of the discrimination she had faced. The ripple effects extended far beyond Johns Hopkins. The case attracted significant attention in medical journals and professional publications, leading to discussions about mental health stigma throughout the healthcare industry. Several medical schools began incorporating training about workplace mental health discrimination into their curricula, and multiple hospitals reviewed their own policies for addressing conflicts between senior physicians. 6 months after Dr. Wells' removal, I received an invitation that represented another milestone in my advocacy work. The American Medical Association asked me to speak at their annual conference about workplace mental health discrimination in healthcare settings, specifically focusing on the strategies that had proved effective in Dr. Chen's case. The presentation took place in a packed auditorium in Chicago, with over 800 physicians, hospital administrators, and medical students in attendance. As I looked out at the audience, I was struck by how far the conversation about mental health had evolved since my own experience at Meridian Financial. The medical profession faces unique challenges when addressing mental health discrimination, I began.
Patient safety concerns can be used to justify almost any personnel decision, making it particularly difficult to challenge discriminatory behavior. However, Dr. Chen's case demonstrates that comprehensive documentation and professional evaluation can provide effective protection even in these high-stakes environments. I walked the audience through the specific strategies that had proved successful in Dr. Chen's case, emphasizing the importance of obtaining specialized psychiatric evaluations that address the unique demands of medical practice. I also discussed the legal protections available to healthcare professionals and the growing recognition that mental health discrimination ultimately compromised patient care by creating hostile work environments. During the question and answer session, multiple physicians shared their own experiences with workplace mental health stigma. One emergency room doctor described being questioned about his fitness for practice after he had advocated for better mental health support for medical residents. A pediatric surgeon talked about facing implications of instability after she had reported safety violations in her hospital's operating rooms. These stories reinforced my understanding that workplace mental health discrimination was pervasive throughout the healthcare industry, often used as a tool to silence physicians who raised inconvenient questions about patient safety, resource allocation, or administrative decisions. After my presentation, I was approached by Dr. Michael Foster, the president of the American College of Surgeons, who had been following Dr. Chen's case with interest. He explained that his organization was developing new guidelines for addressing mental health issues in surgical practice and asked if I would consider joining their advisory committee. We need someone with your expertise to help us create policies that support surgeon wellness while preventing the kind of discrimination Dr. Chen experienced, Dr. Foster explained. The surgical community has traditionally been resistant to discussions about mental health, but cases like yours and Dr. Chen's are forcing us to confront these issues directly. Joining the advisory committee provided an opportunity to influence mental health policy at the highest levels of surgical practice. Working with leading surgeons, psychiatrists, and healthcare administrators, we developed comprehensive guidelines that balance the need to support physician mental health with the imperative to ensure patient safety. The guidelines included specific protocols for addressing legitimate concerns about physician performance while preventing the weaponization of mental health stigma in personnel decisions. They established clear procedures for obtaining professional evaluations when necessary and created accountability measures for administrators who misused mental health implications in personnel decisions. Most importantly, the guidelines recognized that physician mental health and patient safety were fundamentally connected rather than competing concerns. Surgeons working in supportive environments with appropriate mental health resources were more likely to provide excellent patient care than those operating under fear of discrimination and retaliation. The implementation of these guidelines across surgical training programs and hospital systems represented a significant victory for workplace mental health advocacy. Within 2 years, over 300 hospitals had adopted the new protocols, and medical schools began incorporating mental health awareness training into their surgery residency programs. Dr. Chen's case had also inspired legislative action at the state level. Maryland passed the Healthcare Professional Protection Act, which strengthened legal protections for medical professionals facing mental health discrimination and required hospitals to implement comprehensive anti-discrimination policies. The law included provisions that were directly inspired by Dr. Chen's experience, such as requirements for specialized training for medical administrators and protection for physicians who reported patient safety concerns. Most significantly, it established a state ombudsman program to investigate complaints of mental health discrimination in healthcare settings. 3 years after Dr. Wells was removed from Johns Hopkins, I received an unexpected call from Dr. Chen with news that brought our collaboration full circle. She had been appointed as the hospital's new director of physician wellness, a position created specifically to address mental health issues and workplace culture challenges throughout the medical center.
I wanted you to know that I'm implementing programs based on everything we learned from my case, Dr. Chen told me during our conversation. We're providing comprehensive mental health support for all physicians while creating clear protections against discrimination. The goal is to ensure that no other doctor has to go through what I experienced. Dr. Chen's new role allowed her to create systematic changes that would prevent future incidents of mental health discrimination while supporting physicians who genuinely needed mental health assistance. She had established partnerships with qualified psychiatric evaluators, created educational programs for medical administrators, and implemented clear accountability measures for supervisors who misused mental health implications in personal decisions. The program at Johns Hopkins became a model for other medical centers across the country, demonstrating that effective mental health support and anti-discrimination protections could coexist successfully. Dr. Chen's transformation from victim to leader of institutional change represented the kind of positive outcome that made my advocacy work deeply meaningful. As I reflected on Dr. Chen's journey and its impact on the broader healthcare community, I realized that each successful case built upon the lessons learned from previous experiences. The strategies that had emerged from my own confrontation with Marcus Webb had evolved and adapted to address the unique challenges faced by professionals in different industries. The comprehensive psychiatric evaluation approach that had been central to my defense against Marcus's allegations had become a sophisticated tool for addressing discrimination across multiple professional settings. The workplace policy development that had begun at Meridian Financial had influenced organizations throughout the healthcare industry and beyond. Most importantly, the advocacy network that had grown from my initial experience had created a sustainable infrastructure for supporting professionals facing mental health discrimination. The Foundation's work with Dr. Chen had demonstrated that even the most challenging cases could be successfully addressed when approached with proper preparation, documentation, and professional support. The conversation that had started with whispers in a Phoenix break room had become a national dialogue about workplace mental health rights that was creating positive change across industries and professions. Each victory built upon previous successes, creating a growing body of precedent and expertise that made it increasingly difficult for discriminatory behavior to go unchallenged. The path from victim to advocate had been neither easy nor predictable, but it had ultimately led to the most meaningful work of my career. By refusing to accept discrimination and choosing to fight back with facts rather than emotions, I had not only protected my own professional future, but had helped create a better workplace environment for thousands of others facing similar challenges. Sometimes the greatest impact comes not from avoiding difficult confrontations, but from meeting them with courage, preparation, and an unwavering commitment to justice.